Hey creative friends, welcome to my channel. And if you are tuning in today for a Throwback Thursday on how to make dandelion jelly, that's what you're expecting to see, but I'm going to give you some new information. Now, dandelion jelly, I had a recipe for dandelion jelly on here, and it was on there for years because I did it a really long time ago. That's why it would have been a Throwback Thursday. But I kind of hang out like online with a group of very good YouTube channels that I just love these folks. We've been a kind of a group for a while, a long time actually. We do collaborations together, but not only that, we kind of chat about things that come up in canning and interesting things about keeping safe and ideas and stuff. It's just a great group. And I will put the link to all their channels in the description because this group are people that I trust. I know they focus on safe canning. I know they focus on approved recipes. And we all focus on making sure that you have the most up-to-date information to keep you safe that we can possibly provide. So that being said, Angela over at the Inquisitive Farmwife said the other day in our group chat that she had heard something about dandelion jelly is no longer a safe thing. Well, I hadn't heard that. I'm a master food preserver. Nobody told me that. And I was like, what? And then Lisa over at Sutton's Daze started talking about it. Anyway, we all started chatting about it. And I thought, I'm going to do some research. And I'm glad I did because evidently it has changed. The focus of dandelion jelly has changed and there's a reason for it. So what I did was I went over and I looked at the ask2.extension.org website. And that is the, it's kind of like an Ask an Expert place. And the person who answers the question on this one particularly is a gentleman named Jared Hibbard Swanson. He's a great guy. I know him. I've met him. He works very closely with all the extensions here in Oregon in their Master Food Preserver program. So he knows what he's talking about. So anyway, evidently at some point, somebody sent in the question asking about the dandelion jelly. And his response was interesting because he said, thanks for reaching out. I will put a link to where I got this answer, and I will also put a link to the ask2.extension.org. So if you have canning questions, you can email them directly too. That's the point. It's an Ask an Expert site, and it's a great place to just kind of look and get answers to things that have been asked before. Very interesting. Anyway, so Jared said, thanks for reaching out with your question about dandelion jelly. I'm going to read bits of this, but you can go read the whole thing. It says, the concern you raise is an important one. Now listen, the high acidity of most canned fruits naturally inhibits the growth of botulism spores due to their acidity. Vegetables and proteins are naturally low in acid. Those are the things that have to be processed in pressure canners because the heat gets so high. It's the heat that then kills the botulism spores. But you have to be careful when you're selecting a canning recipe that accounts for any low acidity. So if you're doing something like when you look at salsas or something that have low acid foods, but they're done in a boil water canner, that's because the combination of ingredients will make it a high acid food. So it says food scientists formulate recipes that either involve adding acid to lower the pH, and I always say acid and pH, that gets confusing, but it's like a seesaw. If the acid is low, the pH is high. If the pH is low, the acid is high. So that's a good way to remember that. But anyway, so they adding acid to lower the pH or adding lots of sugar to make the water unavailable to microorganisms. Because what happens is when the sugar is added, it pulls all the water into it, like it absorbs all the water, leaving not enough water for microorganisms to grow because, you know, things to grow need water, but that's the way they do it. Or they usually process it that's why jellies always have so much acid. It pulls all that, even though that they're a high acid food, it pulls all the extra water away to eliminate anything that could help microorganisms grow. But low acid foods, you're not going to add sugar to beef, right? You're not going to add sugar to tuna. So you need to process that in a pressure canner so the temperature is so high. But when it comes to dandelions, so it says now your dandelion recipes, he was able to find information on the University of Wyoming. Out there, when you go look for dandelion recipes, there's going to be a lot of them. And yes, my original reference was from the University of Wyoming. But it says, it looks like the primary recipe posted online for dandelion jelly which included the University of California Bulletin, was from 2011. It was the publication from then, from the University of Wyoming, which is no longer on their website. So if I went back to find it now, I wouldn't be able to find it. This University of Wyoming recipe does call for a large amount of sugar, basically a 1-to-1 ratio of sugar to water, which is likely the reason that the recipe was considered safe, because they felt like so much of the water was absorbed with the sugar, it wouldn't have left water for microorganisms to grow. Because if the sugar content is high enough in a jelly recipe, there's no water available for microorganisms to use, thus making it safe from botulism growth. Even if you use something like a dandelion, which you can't, dandelion is not a fruit, so it's not naturally high in acid. So, but you can't guess how much sugar to put in a recipe. So don't think you're going to go pick something and think, oh, if I add a whole bunch of sugar, it'll taste great. You can't guess the right amount of sugar to make something safe. It has to work out in the plumbing kind of. So he says he contacted the University of Wyoming to find out more. And what he discovered was, let me read that answer for you. Here it is. It says he heard back, and it seems that the canning recipe for dandelion jelly is no longer considered safe. A food scientist at the National Center for Home Food Preservation flagged this recipe as potentially risky several years ago, and Wyoming decided to pull the recipe because they're being responsible, right? So as I suspected, the acidity is not low enough to prevent the growth of botulism spores, and the water activity is potentially high enough to still allow for microbial growth. So you've got a product, the dandelion, which is not high in acidity. You've got the sugar, but probably not enough to pull enough of the water so that if there's some botulism, it's still going to have the water to grow. So that's why. Better safe than sorry, right? And so then it says, they're also asking other sites that have this to remove it, because when these things happen, they don't send out like a massive bulletin to the entire country. It's just research, and so it's in their research. And I wish they would, but you can always make a dandelion jelly and then just put it in the freezer. So if you really, really, really want to make dandelion jelly, just don't can it. Put it in the freezer. You can do that. It'll work fine. Just make it a freezer jam or jelly. So there's that. But I just wanted to give you that information because I think it's important to stay on top of things. And another thing people ask all the time, if you think about it, like, okay, if I go pick blackberries, they are a fruit. They are naturally so high in sugar and so high in acid that they're fine. But a dandelion, not a fruit. And you never know the how it was grown either, or how it grew, in what soil, in what conditions, and that makes a difference for especially things like wild mushrooms. People say, oh, how come I can't can a wild mushroom? Well, because you can can the button mushrooms and things that you get at the store, because they are all grown under the same conditions with the same outcome expectation of that product. When you go out picking mushrooms, we have lots of them here. People go out and pick them. That's a living for some people here. You don't know the kind of dirt they've grown in. Some of them are small and light. Some of them are big and dense. They're not all uniform. So you can't really come up with a safe canning recipe for like wild mushrooms particularly. But you can freeze stuff. You really want to actually go ahead and cook any wild mushrooms and then freeze them, and they thaw out and they're phenomenal. So that's a good way. There's always a way, but there's a safe way and a not safe way. So now apparently dandelion jelly is considered not a safe way. But I've made it before, and actually to me it just tastes like corn syrup. So it's not like it's got this amazing flavor, but even if it did, I would put it in the freezer. So I hope this helped you, and I'm sorry if you were looking for a recipe to make dandelion jelly and you were like, dang, it's just her talking to me. But that's what I do. So remember to check the links in the description for all the folks that I hang out with that I trust and I know are safe. The ask2extension.org, and the link to this actual article. So those will be in the description, and I appreciate you checking it out. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.